On today's episode, we're going to talk about cost, volume, profit, better known as CVP. And it's a pretty important business concept. It's also really useful, so I encourage you to stick around and pay attention. So, simply put, CVP is a way to explain how costs and the different sales volume can have an impact on your company's profits. Before we dive further into that though, there's some basic terminology that we'll probably have to go through. And I think the best way to explain all of this is probably through an example. So I'm going to have to grab a few items from this place. I love coming to a Home Depot. I hope they have what I'm looking for. I wonder if they sell any long pieces of wood.
Thank you for shopping at the Home Depot.
You're welcome. Intermediate accounting. I knew I'd use you one day. The ground isn't level. That'll do. So, imagine that this teeter-totter right in back of me is your business. Let's say your business incurs a fixed cost every month of $5,000. This fixed cost is constant. You can't get rid of it. It's always there. And as long as you don't make any sales, you're always going to have a loss. Now, when you start making sales, wait, before we start selling anything, we need to talk about another type of cost. So, unlike fixed cost, which is the same every time, and that would be like the rent on your building or the salary that you pay to your accounting staff, variable costs, on the other hand, they do change. Some examples of variable costs are the cost that is to produce the lid on this bottle, or maybe the amount of plastic that goes into this bottle. But the variable costs are always the same per unit, meaning the amount of cost that goes into producing this bottle and the amount of cost that goes into producing this bottle are exactly the same. What varies is the more of these units that you sell, the higher your variable costs are going to become. So your total aggregate variable costs will change. Now, let's say you sell this for $1,200. And for every one of these bottles, there are variable costs. And let's just say that your variable costs are $575. If you strip out the $575 of variable costs from your total sales, what you're left over is what's called the contribution margin. So $1,200 minus the $575 gives you a contribution margin of $625. And this contribution margin is going to be the same for every single unit that you sell. Okay, let's talk about some sales. Remember, you don't keep all of this. You really just keep the contribution margin, this little guy. So the question is, how many of these do you have to sell in order for you to break even? If you divide your $5,000 of fixed cost and you divide by each unit of these contribution margin, that should tell you how many of these you have to sell before you break even. So last time I checked this, it was 8. And as you can see, we're now at the point where we just broke even. So that's always going to be the case. Fixed costs divided by your unit contribution margin tells you where your break-even point is. To further the example, what if you wanted to make an additional $1,250 profit? Then how many more of these units would you have to sell before you start turning a profit? Now remember, each of these is $625. And you wanted to make a profit of $1,250. So the math should be pretty easy. You would have to sell 2 of these. So let's see if this thing holds. It sort of works, but you get the idea. Now what's really cool about all of this is that past the break-even point, your unit contribution margins become your profits. Oh man, it's hot out there. So I hope that example helped you understand CVP a little bit better. So until next time, go out there and get those contribution margins, and I'll see you in the next video.